Keth Varani had never wanted to cover a war. In 20 years of journalism across 3 galactic sectors, the young Scythian had built a career on cultural stories. They wrote about the singing crystals of Polaris Minor. They documented the thousand-year festivals of the methane breathers. They had never seen blood spilled in anger that changed with a single message from there. Editor. The communication arrived during breakfast at Keth's small apartment on Sylvia. Prime. The words glowed on the screen in urgent amber. Report to central assignment immediately. Priority clearance granted. This is the opportunity of your career. Keth's 3-fingered hands trembled as they read the message again. Priority clearance meant something big, something dangerous, something that would make a name in galactic journalism circles. 1 hour later, Keth sat across from editor Vin in the cramped office at the top of the news spire. Vin was old for a Scythian. Their blue skin faded to pale gray. Their large eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence. They had seen more of the galaxy than most beings ever would. The Mira system. Vin said without greeting. The Vrexian hegemony has besieged a human colony there. 200,000 civilians. 800 soldiers defending them. Keth felt their stomach drop. Humans. Everyone in the galaxy had heard of humans. But the stories never made sense. Some said they were weak, fragile creatures with soft skin and brittle bones. Others spoke of them in whispers, like they were monsters from children's nightmares. The truth seemed impossible to find. The Vrexians expect to take the colony within 3 days. Vin continued. They have agreed to embed a neutral journalist with their forces, to document their victory for the historical record. And you want me to go, Keth said. It was not a question. I want you to witness history. The fall of a human world will be significant. Perhaps it will finally answer the question that haunts every species in this galaxy. What question? Vin leaned forward, their old eyes suddenly intense. Whether humanity lives up to its reputation, or whether they are simply another species waiting to be conquered. Keth accepted the assignment. There was really no choice. A journalist who refused such an opportunity would never work again. But as they packed their equipment and prepared for the long journey to the Mira system, a cold feeling settled in their chest that would not leave. The transport ship was a commercial freighter converted for passenger use. Keth shared the common area with travelers from a dozen different species. There was a Torvan merchant with scales the color of old copper. A pair of Kilix negotiators clicked their mandibles in constant conversation. A single methane breather floated in their portable atmosphere tank, silent and mysterious. It was the old Torvan merchant who first noticed Keth's press credentials. Going to the Mira system, the merchant asked, their voice a low rumble. Going to watch the Vrexians take that human colony? Keth nodded. To document it, yes. The merchant made a strange sound that might have been laughter. Document. Yes, you will document something, I am certain. But it may not be what you expect. What do you mean? The Torvan leaned closer. Their breath smelled of sulfur and old metal. I have traded in human space for 40 years. I have seen them laugh and sing and create beautiful things. I have also seen them fight, and I stopped trading in human space. Not because they treated me poorly. They were always fair, always honest. But I saw what they did to a pirate crew that attacked one of their civilian transports. I saw what was left of those pirates when the humans were finished. The Torvan shuddered, and their scales made a rattling sound. The Vrexians think they are conquering a weak species. They have made a terrible mistake. Keth wanted to ask more questions, but the Torvan turned away and would not speak again. As the journey continued, Keth spent their time reviewing every piece of information they could find about humanity. The galactic databases were full of contradictions. Human physical specifications listed them as unremarkable. Average height, average strength, a fragile biology that required very specific atmospheric conditions. Their natural weapons were laughable compared to species with claws or fangs or venomous stingers. But then there were the other entries, the ones that spoke of endurance beyond reason. Humans could continue functioning with injuries that would kill most species. They could survive in environments that should be immediately fatal. They formed emotional bonds so strong that they would die to protect beings they had never met. And then there was the section on human warfare. Keth read about the human Kreth War of 2387. The Kreth had attacked a human, agricultural colony without warning. They had killed 60,000 civilians in the initial assault. The humans had responded with a military campaign that lasted for years and ended with the complete surrender of the Kreth Empire. Not destruction, surrender. The Kreth still existed as a species, but they had never again raised weapons against anyone. Keth read about the pirate clans that once dominated the Orion Arm, thousands of ships, millions of fighters. They had made the mistake of kidnapping human children from a colony transport. The Terran Republic had hunted them for 3 years. When it was over, there were no pirate clans. There were no pirates at all. Just empty stations and drifting ships, and the silence of the void. They are not a violent species. One analysis read, they prefer peace and trade and cultural exchange. But when violence is required, they pursue it with a focus and determination that is frankly terrifying. Other species fight to win. Humans fight to end the possibility of fighting again. Keth did not sleep well for the rest of the journey. The Vrexian observation vessel was called the Triumphant Claw. It hung in orbit above the Mira colony like a great beast waiting to strike. The ship was impressive by most standards. 500 meters long, heavy armor plating, weapons arrays that could reduce a city to ash in seconds. Commander's Rex welcomed Keth aboard personally. The Vrexian was tall and broad, with the gray-green skin and sharp teeth of his species. His forearms were decorated with rank insignia and battle honors. He moved with the confidence of a predator who had never known fear. "Welcome, journalist," Rex said. "You have arrived at the perfect moment. The final assault begins in 12 hours. By tomorrow, this system will belong to the hegemony." Keth followed the commander to an observation deck that looked down on the planet below. Mirafor was a beautiful world. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting across the atmosphere. From this height, it looked peaceful, innocent. The humans have 800 soldiers defending 100,000 civilians. Zrex continued. We have 30,000 warriors and orbital superiority. The mathematics are simple. Why this colony? Keth asked. Why attack humans at all? Zrex made a dismissive gesture with one of his arms. The humans have grown soft in their peace. They expand slowly. They trade rather than conquer. The hegemony sees opportunity. We take this colony. We gain a foothold in human space. We show the galaxy that humanity is not the great power everyone believes them to be. And what do you believe? Zrex turned to look at Keth. His yellow eyes were cold. I believe they are prey pretending to be predators. I have studied their military capabilities. They have powerful weapons, yes, but they are so reluctant to use them. They talk endlessly of peace and diplomacy and understanding. These are the values of the weak. Keth said nothing, but they remembered the Torvan merchants' words. They remembered the empty stations of the pirate clans. The final hours before the assault passed slowly. Keth watched the Vrexian warriors prepare for battle. They were impressive fighters, massive and strong, armed with plasma weapons and protected by heavy armor. Each of them seemed eager for combat. They laughed and boasted about the kills they would make. They spoke of the human colony like it was already conquered. No one mentioned what had happened to the Kreth. No one spoke of the pirate clans. Perhaps they did not know, or perhaps they simply did not believe when the first dropships launched. Keth was on the observation deck with Commander's Rex. The view was spectacular. Dozens of armored craft descending through the atmosphere like falling stars. Zrex narrated the assault with pride. The landing zones, the attack formations, the expected timeline for victory. Then the dropships started exploding. The first explosion was so sudden that Keth thought it was a malfunction. A ball of fire bloomed in the atmosphere as a dropship came apart. But then another exploded, and another, and another. What is happening? Zrex demanded. The tactical display showed the answer. Ground fire from the colony, but not from fixed positions. The shots were coming from everywhere and nowhere. Each shot was perfect. Each shot found its target. In the first 5 minutes, the Vrexians lost 12 dropships and 2,000 warriors. They had not even reached the ground. This is impossible, Zrex whispered. They have only 800 soldiers. How can they generate this much fire? Keth watched the dropships burn. They thought of the old Torvin's words. They thought of the contradictory records. They thought of a species that was both fragile and terrifying. The assault continued. More drop ships launched. More drop ships fell. By the end of the first day, the Phyrexians had lost 5,000 warriors and had barely established a foothold on the planet's surface. Commander Rex stood at the tactical display, his face frozen in disbelief. The sea. 2 weeks had passed since the assault began. Commander Rex no longer spoke of quick victory. He no longer spoke much at all. Keth watched the daily briefings from their place at the back of the command center. The numbers told a story of slow disaster. The Phyrexians had committed more forces to the battle. They now had 45,000 warriors on the ground. Their casualties had climbed past 8,000 dead. The humans had lost 19 soldiers. 19 soldiers into weeks of fighting, against 45,000 enemy warriors. The Phyrexian officers spoke of tactics and terrain and fortifications. They blamed the planet's geography. They blamed equipment failures. They blamed everything except the obvious truth. The humans were simply better at war. Keth had watched footage of the fighting. The Phyrexian cameras captured everything in harsh detail. Human soldiers moving through the colony streets like shadows. They appeared, fired, and vanished before the Phyrexians could respond. They fought in small groups that seemed to communicate without speaking. They used the buildings and the terrain as weapons. Every engagement ended the same way. Phyrexian dead on the ground. Humans gone. On the 14th day of the siege, Keth made a decision. They approached Commander Rex in his private quarters. "I want to cross to the human side." Keth said that. Zrx looked up from his drink. His eyes were red with exhaustion and something that might have been fear. "You want to go to the humans? I am a neutral journalist. I have credentials from the Galactic Press Association. The humans are known to respect such things. I want to document their perspective as well as yours." Rex was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Go," he said. "Go and see them up close. Perhaps you will find the answer to the question that keeps me awake at night. How does a species of soft-skinned weaklings fight like demons from the old stories?" Keth packed their equipment and arranged transport to the front lines. A Phyrexian shuttle dropped them to kilometers from the human perimeter. From there, they would walk. The land between the armies was quiet. Keth moved through fields of strange purple grass toward a line of buildings that marked the edge of the colony. White flags flew from their equipment pack. Their hands were empty and raised. They expected to be challenged. They expected weapons pointed at their face. They expected fear. Instead, a voice called out from somewhere ahead. "You're the journalist?" "The Scythian." Keth stopped. "Yes, I am Keth Varani. I have credentials from the Galactic Press Association. I wish to document your defense for the historical record." A human emerged from behind a low wall. She was young, with brown skin and dark hair tied back from her face. She wore simple combat armor marked with insignia Keth did not recognize. A weapon hung from her shoulder, but she did not point it at Keth. "Sergeant Maria Torres," the human said. "We've been expecting you. The commander said you might come across. You knew I was coming?" Torres smiled. It was a strange expression to see in a war zone. "We know a lot of things. Come on. I'll take you to Captain Vasquez." Keth followed the human soldier through the colony's outer districts. What they saw surprised them more than any battle footage. The streets were clean. The buildings were intact, and people were everywhere. Civilians. Human civilians going about their daily lives. A group of children ran past, chasing some kind of ball. Old people sat on benches in a small park, talking and laughing. A market was open on the main street, with vendors selling food and clothes and household goods. Somewhere nearby, music was playing. "I do not understand," Keth said. "There is a war happening. You are under siege." Torres glanced back at them. "What's not to understand? We're home. We're not going to stop living just because someone is trying to kill us. But the danger, the children, why do you not evacuate them to safety? Where would we take them? The Phyrexians control the space around us. And anyway, this is the safest place they could be. They're behind our lines. Nothing is getting through." Torres said this with complete confidence, not boasting, just simple fact. They passed a school where classes were in session. Through the windows, Keth could see young humans sitting at desks, listening to a teacher explain something with animated gestures. The teacher noticed them passing and waved. "The war is 2 kilometers away," Keth said. "About that." "Yeah, and you are teaching children." Torres stopped walking. She turned to face Keth fully. Her expression was patient, but firm. "Let me explain something about humans. We don't stop being human just because there's a fight. These kids still need to learn. They still need structure and normalcy and hope. If we shut everything down and huddled in bunkers, we'd be telling them that we've already lost. We haven't lost. We're not going to lose. So the schools stay open. The markets stay open. Life goes on." Keth had no response to this. They simply followed Torres deeper into the colony. Captain Elena Vasquez was waiting for them in the command center. She was older than Torres, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult years. But she moved with the easy grace of someone who was very good at violence, and did not need to prove it. "Welcome to Mira Colony," Vasquez said. "I understand you want to see how we fight." "I want to understand," Keth said. "The Vrexians have 45,000 warriors. You have 800. Yet you are winning, not winning, holding. There's a difference." Vasquez gestured to a map on the wall. "We're not trying to defeat them. We're just trying to survive until help arrives. And when will that be?" Vasquez's expression flickered. Something complicated passed across her face. "That's classified. But you can stay with us. See how we operate. Document whatever you want. We have nothing to hide." Over the following days, Keth lived among the human soldiers. They ate in their mess halls. They slept in their barracks. They watched them train and fight and die. And slowly, they began to understand. The first thing Keth noticed was the way humans communicated. During combat operations, they barely spoke at all. Hand signals, glances, subtle shifts in body position. A squad of 8 soldiers would move through a battlefield like a single organism, with 8 pairs of eyes and 8 pairs of hands. They seemed to know what each other was thinking. "Practice," Torres explained when Keth asked. "We train together for years before deployment. We learn each other's patterns. After enough time, words just slow you down." The second thing Keth noticed was the endurance. Humans could fight for hours without rest. They could go days with minimal sleep. When they did rest, they fell asleep instantly and woke instantly, ready for combat in seconds. Their bodies seemed designed for sustained conflict in a way that was almost frightening. "We evolved as persistence hunters," Torres said. "Our ancestors chased prey across the grasslands for hours until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. We don't run fast, but we run forever." The third thing Keth noticed was the most disturbing of all. The humans were not trying to kill as many Vrexians as possible. Keth watched a night engagement from a safe position behind the lines. A Vrexian assault force of 200 warriors advanced on a human outpost, defended by 15 soldiers. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 43 Vrexians were dead. The rest had retreated. "Why did you let them go?" Keth asked afterward. "You could have killed many more." Sergeant Torres was cleaning her weapon. Her hands moved automatically, without thought. "Killing isn't the point. They're retreating. They're not a threat anymore. Why waste ammunition on targets that are running away? But they will come back. They will attack again, probably, and we'll stop them again. But we don't kill for sport. We don't kill for revenge. We kill when it's necessary, and not one moment more." Keth thought about this for a long time. They had seen many species fight. The Vrexians killed everything they could reach. The Torvan were the same. Most species treated war as an opportunity for maximum destruction. The humans treated it like surgery. Cut precisely. Remove the threat. Stop the bleeding. No more. On the 7th day among the humans, Keth witnessed something that changed their understanding forever. A Vrexian soldier had been wounded during an assault. He lay in the open ground between the lines, too injured to move, crying out in the harsh Vrexian language. His fellow soldiers would not risk retrieving him. The humans could have easily killed him. Instead, 2 Marines left their defensive positions under covering fire. They reached the wounded Vrexian, applied emergency medical treatment, and dragged him to safety. They brought him behind human lines and gave him to the medical team. Kef found one of the Marines afterward. His name was Private Chen, barely more than a child himself. Why? Kef asked. He was your enemy. He was trying to kill you hours ago. Chen looked confused by the question. He was hurt. He was scared. He was calling for his mother. I could hear him. He paused, struggling to explain something that seemed obvious to him. He's not really my enemy. He's just a guy who was told to fight us. If it was up to him, he'd probably rather be home with his family. I can't hate someone for that. But your commanders, your superiors, they allowed this? Allowed it? Captain Vasquez suggested it. She said we should try to save him if we could do it safely. Chen smiled slightly. She said every enemy we treat well is an enemy who might question why they're fighting us in the first place. Kef returned to Captain Vasquez's command center that evening. The question that had been building in their mind for days' siege had entered its fourth week. Kef had stopped counting the days. Time moved differently inside the colony, measured not by hours, but by the rhythm of assault and defense, rest and readiness. The Vrexians had committed more forces. 60,000 warriors now pushed against the human lines. They had learned to move more carefully, to avoid the killing zones where human snipers waited with impossible patience. But still they died, and still the humans held. Kef had become a familiar presence among the Marines. They no longer stared when the Sylthian journalists joined them for meals, or followed them to the observation posts. Some of them had even started sharing stories. It was the stories that haunted Kef most. Sergeant Torres was the first to open up. They were sitting on a rooftop overlooking the eastern perimeter, watching the distant flashes of Vrexian artillery testing the colony's shields. The night was clear and full of stars. You want to know why we are the way we are, Torres said. It was not a question. You want to understand the fear. Yes, Kef admitted. Everyone in the galaxy speaks of humanity in whispers, but the stories never make sense. You are kind. You are merciful. You save wounded enemies and keep schools open during sieges. Yet everyone fears you. I cannot put these things together. Torres was quiet for a while. When she spoke, her voice was distant. Do you know anything about human history? I mean really know it. Not the diplomatic summaries they teach in galactic schools. I know you had wars among yourselves. Most species do, before they reach the stars. Torres laughed softly. It was not a happy sound. Wars, yes, we had wars. She looked up at the stars as if she could see through them to something far away. In the 20th century, before we left our planet, we fought to wars that killed over 100 million people. 100 million. In just 30 years, Kef felt something cold move through their body. 100 million was more than the population of many species. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single moment. Torres continued. We built enough of them to burn our whole world 100 times over. We came within minutes of using them on ourselves. More than once. But you stopped. Barely. And not because we suddenly became good people. We stopped because we finally understood what we were. We looked in the mirror and saw the monster looking back. And we were so horrified that we swore to put it in chains forever. Torres turned to look at Kef directly. Her eyes were dark and serious. That's why the galaxy fears us. Not because of what we do, because of what we are. We are a species that invented industrialized slaughter. We are a species that built nuclear weapons and pointed them at each other. We are a species that, given enough provocation, is capable of absolutely anything. She paused. And we know it. Every single one of us carries that knowledge. It is the weight that presses on our hearts every day. It is why we fight so hard for peace. Because we understand, better than any species in this galaxy, what happens when peace fails. Kef did not know what to say. They had read about human history. They had seen the statistics and the summaries. But hearing it spoken aloud, in the quiet voice of a soldier who had seen death and dealt death, was different. It was real. My grandmother survived the siege of Europa, Torres said, returning to her watch of the horizon. 3 years in an underground bunker while raiders tried to break through. No resupply. Recycled water and grown food and constant fighting. 2,000 people went in. 600 came out. She was 7 years old when it started. That is terrible. It was. But here's what you need to understand. She didn't come out of that experience wanting revenge. She didn't spend her life hating the people who did it. She spent her life building things. She helped design the agricultural systems that feed 100 colonies now. She taught me that the best response to suffering is to make sure no one else has to suffer the same way. Torres smiled slightly. That's humanity. We have seen the worst of what we can be. We have done terrible things to each other. And instead of pretending it never happened, we carry it with us. We teach it to our children. We say, this is what we did. This is what we must never do again. And every day, we try to be better. Over the following days, Keth collected more stories. Each one added another piece to the puzzle. Private Chen spoke of his great-grandfather, who had survived something called the Pacific Conflict. He lost 3 brothers in 2 years. When it was over, he forgave the people who had killed them. He said hatred was a poison that would destroy him from inside. He started a hospital instead. He spent 50 years healing people who had been his enemies. Lieutenant Park talked about the resource wars of the 22nd century. Billions of people died fighting over water and oil and arable land. We nearly destroyed ourselves completely. That's when we finally unified. Not because we suddenly loved each other, because we realized that if we didn't stop fighting, there would be nothing left to fight over. Captain Vasquez shared her own story one evening. After a particularly brutal Vrexian assault had been thrown back with heavy losses on both sides. I was at New Helsinki when the Kreth attacked, she said. The colony's lights were dim, conserving power, and her face was half in shadow. 60,000 civilians. The Kreth killed them all in the first hour. I was on the relief ship that arrived 3 days later. I saw what was left. Keth had read about the Kreth War. They knew the statistics. But the look in Vasquez's eyes told a story that no statistics could capture. What did you do? Keth asked quietly. What we always do. We mourned. We raged. We wanted to destroy them utterly. Vasquez's hands clenched into fists. I wanted to destroy them. I had friends on New Helsinki. People I had trained with. People I loved. The Kreth took them from me, and I wanted to take everything from the Kreth in return. But you did not. No. We fought them for years. We broke their fleets and conquered their worlds. And when they surrendered, we could have wiped them out. We had the power. Many people demanded it. Vasquez unclenched her hands slowly, deliberately. Instead, we accepted their surrender. We let them live. We even helped them rebuild. Why? Because genocide is what the old humans would have done. The ones who built the death camps and the nuclear weapons and the killing fields. We decided a long time ago that we would not be them anymore. No matter how much it hurt. No matter how much they deserved it. She looked at Keth with those old, tired eyes. The Kreth are still out there. They haven't attacked anyone in 40 years. Their children are growing up in a galaxy where humans are the ones who showed mercy. That's worth more than revenge could ever be. The stories kept coming. Keth recorded all of them. They painted a picture of a species that had walked through fire and emerged scarred, but transformed. A species that remembered every atrocity it had committed and used that memory as a shield against becoming monsters again. On the 28th day of the siege, Keth witnessed human grief. A Marine named Rodriguez died during a night assault. He was young, barely 20 years old, with a smile that could light up a room. Keth had spoken with him just the day before. He had been excited about returning home after his deployment. He had a younger sister he wanted to see. The funeral was held at dawn. The entire garrison that could be spared from the lines gathered in a small plaza in the colony's center. They stood in perfect formation, but their faces were not military. Their faces were human, full of pain and love and loss. Captain Vasquez spoke first. Her words were simple. Private Miguel Rodriguez gave his life defending this colony. He gave his life defending people he had never met and would never know. He was 20 years old. He loved music and terrible jokes and his family. He was our brother. We will carry him with us forever. Then the other Marines spoke. One by one, they shared memories. The time Rodriguez had taught himself to cook and nearly burned down the barracks. The letters he wrote to his sister every week. The way he always volunteered for the dangerous missions, because he did not want anyone else to take the risk. Keth, watched and recorded, and felt something breaking inside. Then these were not the cold, killing machines that the galaxy imagined. These were people. Full, complete, complicated people who loved and grieved and remembered. They had the power to destroy worlds, and they used it to protect strangers. They had the ability to be the monsters of legend, and they chose to be the heroes instead. After the funeral, Keth found Torres standing alone at the edge of the plaza. Her face was wet with tears. "You feel everything so deeply," Keth said. It was not a question. Torres wiped her eyes. "Rodriguez was my friend. Of course I feel it deeply. What else would I do?" Many species learn to suppress such emotions in war, to become numb. It is considered necessary for survival. Maybe. But then what are we fighting for? Torres looked at Keth with those human eyes, full of pain and determination. If we lose our ability to feel, to grieve, to love, then we've already lost everything that matters. Rodriguez died so that the people of this colony could keep living, keep loving, keep feeling. If I stop feeling because of his death, then his death meant nothing. Keth thought about this for a long time afterward. They thought about the Vrexians outside the perimeter, who fought with cold efficiency and no apparent. The warning came at dawn on the 42nd day of the siege. Keth was in the command center with Captain Vasquez when the sensor alarms began screaming. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. "Not dozens, hundreds. Report," Vasquez said. Her voice was calm. To calm, Lieutenant Park's fingers flew across her console. Her face went pale. 200 Vrexian warships entering the system. Main battle fleet configuration. "They're not here to support the ground assault, Captain. They're here to end this." The room fell silent. 200 warships meant bombardment capability. It meant the Vrexians had given up on capturing the colony intact. It meant they were going to burn Mirafor to ash and everyone on it. Vasquez stood very still for a long moment. Then she turned to the communications officer. "Send the signal." 3 words, simple, quiet, but they changed everything. Keth had learned about the Terran military structure during their weeks in the colony. They knew that humanity maintained a vast network of fleets across their territory. They knew that the nearest major force was the 7th Fleet, stationed just 3 days away at normal speed. What they had not known was that the 7th Fleet had been holding position just 2 hours from Mira for the past month, waiting, ready, hoping they would not be needed. Signal acknowledged, the communications officer reported. 7th Fleet is inbound. At 94 minutes, Vasquez nodded. There was no relief on her face, only resignation. "We held as long as we could," she said quietly. 42 days. It was not enough. Not enough for what? Keth asked. Not enough time for diplomacy to work. Not enough time for the Vrexians to realize their mistake. Not enough time to end this without blood. Vasquez looked at the tactical display, at the 200 red dots converging on the planet. "Now we do it the other way." The 94 minutes passed slowly. The Vrexian fleet took up position in orbit, their weapons charging for planetary bombardment. Commanders Rex transmitted a final demand for surrender. Vasquez did not bother responding. The colony civilians had been moved to the deep shelters weeks ago, prepared for exactly this scenario. The streets were empty now, the schools closed, the markets silent. Only the soldiers remained above ground, waiting for whatever came next. Then the sky changed. Keth was on the observation deck with Torres when the 7th Fleet arrived. 40 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were smaller than the Vrexian vessels, sleeker, built for speed and precision rather than raw power. But they moved with a coordination that made the Vrexian fleet look clumsy. 40 ships against 200, Keth said. "You are still outnumbered 5 to 1. Torres smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Watch. The battle began with a Vrexian volley. Hundreds of plasma bursts screamed through space toward the Terran formation. It should have been devastating. At that range, with those numbers, the Terran fleet should have suffered massive casualties. Instead, the Terran ships simply were not there. Keth watched in disbelief as the human vessels executed maneuvers that seemed impossible. They twisted and rolled and dove through 3-dimensional space like living creatures. They anticipated the Vrexian fire before it was launched and positioned themselves in the gaps. Not a single shot connected. How? Keth breathed. Our pilots train in conditions that would kill most species, Torres said. High gravity, rapid acceleration, extreme G-forces. A normal human can survive accelerations that would turn a Vrexian into paste. And our neural interfaces let us react faster than conscious thought. On the tactical display, the Terran ships began their counterattack. They moved in pairs, covering each other, creating intersecting fields of fire that trapped Vrexian vessels with nowhere to run. Each Terran ship seemed to know exactly where the others would be at every moment. They fought as a single organism with 40 bodies. The first Vrexian destroyer died in a cascade of explosions. Then another. Then 3 at once. Commander Rex's voice came over the open channels. He was screaming orders at his fleet. Reposition. Concentrate fire. Bring the weight of numbers to bear. But his ships were too slow. Too predictable. They moved in rigid formations that the Terran vessels sliced through like knives through water. 30 minutes into the battle, the Vrexians had lost 40 ships. The Terran fleet had lost none. Keth watched the destruction with growing horror. This was not the restrained, surgical warfare they had witnessed on the ground. This was overwhelming force applied with brutal efficiency. The Terran ships killed and killed again without hesitation. The restraint, Keth said. The mercy. Where is it now? Torres's face was hard. This is a different situation. On the ground, we were fighting soldiers who had been ordered to attack us. Most of them were conscripts. They didn't have a choice. Up there, she gestured at the tactical display. Those are warships with planet-killing weapons. If we let them fire on Mira, 100,000 civilians die. There's no mercy we can offer that would not cost innocent lives, so you destroy them. We destroy the threat. We give them every chance to retreat. Look, Torres pointed at the display. See those ships breaking formation at the edge? They're running. We're not pursuing. We never pursue retreating enemies unless they continue hostile action. It was true. Vrexian ships that broke away from the battle were allowed to flee. The Terran fleet focused only on vessels that continued attacking. But the core of the Vrexian fleet did not retreat. Commander Rex held them together through sheer force of will. He reorganized his remaining ships into a tight defensive cluster and pushed forward, trying to reach bombardment range of the planet. Brave, Vasquez said from her position in the command center. Her voice carried through the observation deck speakers. Stupid, but brave. He knows he's dying and he's trying to take the colony with him. Will he succeed? Keth asked. No. The Terran flagship moved to intercept the Vrexian formation. It was a beautiful ship, Keth noticed. Long and graceful, with lines that suggested speed and power in perfect balance. It flew directly into the teeth of the Vrexian guns, drawing their fire away from the planet. Admiral Chen's voice came over the command channel. Calm. Professional, all units. Pattern 7. Let's finish this. The Terran fleet responded as one. They collapsed on the Vrexian formation from all sides, their fire concentrated, their movements synchronized. Ship after ship died in balls of plasma fire. The Vrexian formation crumbled under the assault, and then it was over. The tactical display showed the aftermath. 117 Vrexian ships destroyed, 63 in full retreat, 20 drifting dead in space, their crews abandoning ship. The Terran fleet had lost 4 vessels, with 2 more heavily damaged. 40 ships had defeated 100. Pursue, Keth expected to hear. Destroy them all. It was what any other species would have done. Instead, Admiral Chen's voice was quiet. Let them run. Search and rescue priority on escape pods. I want enemy survivors recovered and treated humanely. Torres saw the confusion on Keth's face. We won. There's no need to keep killing. Those ships that are running will carry the story home. They'll tell everyone what happened here. Maybe next time, someone will think twice before attacking a human colony. Keth understood, finally. The overwhelming victory was not about revenge. It was about prevention. It was about making the cost of aggression so clear, so undeniable, that no one would want to pay it. But there was something else. Something Keth had noticed during the battle that they had to ask about. Your ships. They had opportunities to destroy more Vrexian vessels, but they focused on disabling them instead. I saw it. They targeted engines and weapons, not reactors. Torres nodded slowly. Good eye. Yes, Admiral Chen's orders. Disable where possible. Destroy only where necessary. Every ship we disable instead of destroy is a crew that might survive. Every survivor is a family that doesn't lose a loved one. Even after what they tried to do to this colony. Especially after that. Because the moment we start killing for revenge instead of necessity, we become what they think we are. We become the monsters. Torres looked up at the stars, at the debris field where the Vrexian fleet had died. We are capable of terrible things. We proved that today. But we are also capable of mercy. And we proved that too, in the aftermath of the battle. Kef watched the Terran rescue ships moving through the debris field. They recovered Vrexian survivors by the thousands. Enemy soldiers, who had been trying to burn their colony to ash hours before, were brought aboard Terran ships, given medical treatment, fed, and housed in comfortable quarters. Captain Vasquez stood beside Keth at the observation deck, watching the rescue operations. This is why the galaxy fears us, Keth said. Vasquez looked at them curiously. Because we rescue our enemies? Because you can do both. Because you can destroy a fleet of 200 ships and then save every survivor. Because you have the power of monsters and the hearts of healers. The galaxy does not know how to understand a species that contains such contradictions. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small book. Its pages were worn from years of handling. This is a book of human poetry, she said. It was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I joined the Marines. She pressed it into Keth's hands. Take it, read it. Maybe it will help you understand us better than any battle could. Keth accepted the book carefully. Why poetry? Because poetry is how we talk to ourselves about who we want to be. The 3 months had passed since the Battle of Mira. The galaxy had moved on to other stories. But Keth Varani had not forgotten. The peace negotiations had concluded 2 weeks after the Vrexian fleet retreated. Keth had watched the signing ceremony from the press gallery, recording every moment. The Vrexian representatives had been somber, their arrogance replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. The human delegation had been polite, even kind. There were no demands for punishment, no calls for territory, just a simple agreement to end hostilities and begin the long process of healing. The terms had surprised everyone except Keth. The Vrexian hegemony would pay reparations for the damage to Mira colony. They would return all prisoners unharmed. They would publicly acknowledge that their attack had been unprovoked, and they would agree to a simple promise: do not do this again. That was all. No military occupation, no forced demilitarization, no regime change, just an acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a commitment to peace. The galaxy's commentators had called it weakness. They had predicted that the Vrexians would attack again within a decade. They had mocked the Terran Republic for wasting an opportunity to crush a rival power forever. Keth knew better. Before leaving Mira colony, they had spent time with the Vrexian survivors who were being repatriated home. The journalist credentials that had let them embed with the human forces also granted access to the prisoner facilities, where thousands of Vrexian soldiers waited for transport. The facilities were not prisons. They were comfortable housing blocks with common areas and recreation spaces. The Vrexian soldiers were well fed and well treated. Some of them had formed friendships with their human guards. Others simply sat in silence, trying to process what had happened to them. Keth spoke with a young Vrexian officer named Thrick. He had been the tactical officer on one of the destroyed vessels. He had watched his ship die around him and had been rescued from the void by the same species. He had been trying to kill. I do not understand them, Thrick said. His voice was hollow. We attacked their world. We killed their people. We tried to burn their colony to ash, and they pulled me from the wreckage of my ship and treated my wounds and gave me food, and told me I was safe. What do you understand now? Keth asked. Thrick was silent for a long time. I understand that we made a terrible mistake, not just in attacking them, in thinking we knew what they were. He looked at Keth with eyes full of confusion and something that might have been shame. They are not weak because they prefer peace. They are strong enough to choose peace when war would be easier. That is a kind of strength I did not know existed. Those words stayed with Keth during the long journey home. Sylvia Prime welcomed them as a returning hero. The coverage from Mira had made Keth famous across the neutral worlds. Everyone wanted to hear their account of the siege, the battle, the strange and terrifying species that had held against impossible odds, and then shown mercy to their defeated enemies. Keth gave interviews. They wrote articles. They tried to explain what they had witnessed, but words seemed inadequate to capture the full truth of what humanity was. 6 months after returning home, Keth received an invitation to speak at the Galactic Press Association's annual conference. The topic was simple: understanding humanity. The lecture hall was packed. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, all of them eager to hear what the famous war correspondent had learned. Keth stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of alien faces, and wondered how to begin. They started with the images. The first projection showed Mira Colony during the siege. Children walking to school while artillery shells exploded in the distance. Markets full of food and laughter. Life continuing in defiance of death. The second projection showed the battle. Terran ships dancing through Vrexian fire. Impossible maneuvers. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The third projection showed the aftermath. Terran rescue ships pulling Vrexian survivors from the void. Medical teams treating wounded enemies. Soldiers sharing food with the people who had tried to kill them hours before. I went to Mira expecting to document the fall of a human world, Keth said into the silence. I stayed for 42 days and witnessed something I still struggle to describe. I watched 800 soldiers hold against 60,000 enemies. I watched a fleet of 40 ships destroy a fleet of 200. And I watched the victors show mercy to the vanquished in ways that no species in this galaxy would expect. A Torvan journalist raised their hand. The humans are clearly superior warriors. Why do they not use that superiority to conquer the galaxy? Keth considered the question carefully. Because they are afraid of themselves. Confused murmurs rippled through the audience. Let me explain, Keth continued. Humanity has a history that is unlike any other species in this galaxy. Before they reached the stars, they nearly destroyed themselves. Not once, many times. They built weapons capable of ending all life on their world. They created systems of cruelty and death that killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They looked into the abyss of their own potential, and they were so horrified by what they saw that they swore to never go back. Keth pulled up an image of Captain Vasquez. Her tired eyes, her weathered face, the weight of responsibility that she carried without complaint. This woman commanded the garrison at Mira Colony. 800 soldiers against 60,000 enemies. She could have called for reinforcements at any time. The Terran 7th Fleet was just hours away. Instead, she held for 42 days with minimal force, hoping that diplomacy would find a solution before she had to unleash the full power of human warfare. Why? Someone in the audience called out. Because she remembered what happens when humans do not restrain themselves. Because she carried the memory of 100 million dead in ancient wars. Because she understood that unleashing that power, even against a deserving enemy, would cost something precious, something that could never be recovered. Keth changed the image to the book of poetry that Vasquez had given them. Its worn pages, its simple cover. Captain Vasquez gave me this book before I left Mira. She said it would help me understand humanity. She was right. Keth opened the book to a marked page. Let me read you something. These words were written by a human poet almost 500 years ago. In the middle of one of their terrible wars, the words appeared on the screen behind Keth. If we must die, let it not be like hogs hunted and penned in an inglorious spot. If we must die, oh let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. The audience was silent. This is humanity, Keth said. A species that writes poetry about noble death while inventing weapons of mass destruction. A species that feels everything deeply, loves fiercely, and never forgets the cost of violence. They are not warriors who happen to have morals. They are moral beings who happen to be capable of terrible warfare. And every day, they choose to keep the monster chained. A young Killick student raised a claw. But what if the chains break? What if humanity decides that mercy is no longer worth the cost? Keth smiled sadly. That is the question that keeps the galaxy awake at night. That is why everyone fears them. And what is the answer? Keth looked out at the audience. Dozens of species, Hundreds of individuals, all of them united by the same fear. The answer is that we are at their mercy. All of us, every species in this galaxy exists because humanity has chosen to let us exist. They could conquer us all. They could enslave us or destroy us or do whatever they wished. They have the power. They have always had the power. Keth paused, remembering Sergeant Torres and Private Chen and Captain Vasquez, remembering the wounded Vrexian soldier dragged to safety, remembering the children walking to school, but they choose not to. Every single day, they wake up and make the choice to be better than what they know they could be. They carry the weight of their history like a burden, and they use it to remind themselves why restraint matters, why mercy matters, why peace is worth fighting for. And if they ever forget, the Killick student Press.Keth thought of the poetry book in their bag, of the words that spoke of love and sacrifice and hope, of the stories that Torres and Chen and Park had shared about ancestors who had survived horror and emerged with forgiveness instead of hatred. They won't forget, Keth said. They cannot forget. Their history is written on their souls. Every human carries it with them. The darkness and the light, the monster and the angel. They need both to be complete. And as long as they remember both, the galaxy is safe. The lecture ended. The audience filed out in thoughtful silence, but Keth remained at the podium for a long time, looking at the image of Mira Colony on the screen, the blue planet, the green continents, the children walking to school during a siege. A young Silthian student approached hesitantly. Journalist Varani, I have one more question. Yes? After everything you saw, do you fear humans? Keth considered the question. They thought of the horror of the battle, the precision killing, the fleet reduced to wreckage in less than an hour. They thought of the power that humanity kept hidden, the weapons that most species did not know existed, the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their civilization. But they also thought of Torres crying at Rodriguez's funeral. They thought of Chen,